problems going to come and go. Conflict in relationships, doesn't matter what the relationship is, it's inevitable. Chaos is avoidable.
Your blended family has a 100% chance of success when you do it God's way.
We are Blended Kingdom Families, and we want to provide biblical resources to heal and restore families with a message of hope for the next generation.
Let's get after it.
Hey guys, welcome to the BKF podcast. We are so excited that you're here with us today. If you haven't already, take an opportunity, like, share, comment. We love your feedback, so you can always email us at info@blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Guys, we are excited to launch a new Mental Health Month, and with a lot of special guests. We are also, in addition to being in ministry, we also own a counseling center in Colleyville, Texas called Sevn Therapy. We'd love for you to check it out right now. Sevn Therapy is a membership-based counseling center that delivers a refreshingly upbeat way to experience on-site and teletherapy counseling. From the moment you walk through the doors to the end of your session, we want you to feel welcomed, loved, and excited to come back for more insight, more fellowship, and more healing. Our space is unlike any other. From the vibrant colors throughout the building to the soundproof pods where we conduct therapy, your time will be one of a kind. Here at Sevn, we believe in the importance of practical and biblical counseling for everyone. Whether you're seeking healing from past traumas, wanting to work on your marriage, or simply needing somebody to talk to, we can't wait to see you here. Guys, we're excited to welcome a special guest to the podcast. Sean Reed is one of our close friends. He is, I'm going to let Vanessa kind of introduce him, but he is amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Yes. Well, and you've probably seen Sean before because he's been on the podcast before with his beautiful bride, Lynette. So we've done 2 podcasts with Sean and Lynette, which you can go back and watch on our YouTube channel or listen. But guys, just to give you some info on Sean. So he is a awesome husband, father, author, speaker, podcaster, all the things. But Sean is
also a singer.
Yes, he can sing.
Yeah.
He can sing.
That's how it all
He can
started.
sing, not sing. He can sing.
Thank you, guys.
But Sean, he's been married to his wife Lynette for 24 years, father to 3 adult children, author, and has been in pastoral leadership for over 22 years. He is the director of operations and outreach at Sevn Therapy, so our counseling center.
Let's go.
Yeah. He specializes in marriage mediations only. He's worked over 20 years as a pastor to help people find healing and freedom. Sean creates an atmosphere of openness, understanding, and wisdom for all his clients and provides them with practical insight and techniques to work through life's challenges.
It takes so much for me to sit there and listen to all.
How do you find time to do all that, Sean? Come on now.
We're overachievers.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think all of us are overachievers.
Well, we're excited. I mean, Sean is a wonderful addition to
Yes.
Sevn. Like I said, he's a wonderful friend, and he is a multitude of just wisdom about marriage and so many other different topics. Today, I'm going to let you introduce the topic today, Sean. So what is on your heart to talk about?
Yeah, I really want to talk about developing relational empathy.
That's good.
Relational empathy.
Yes.
Okay.
How do we cultivate empathy? And I will say this: I love Strengths Finders.
Yeah.
And if you haven't taken the Strengths Finders test, you should. It's great. It gives great insight. Empathy is one of the strengths. There are 34. My 34th strength is empathy.
So the marriage pastor says, the last strength I have is empathy.
And ironically, it's what I want to talk about the most.
That is funny.
So what was interesting for me is no one really taught me how to connect with a person when they are hurting.
Yeah.
Understand.
You know what I mean? The greatest illustration I had of it, though, it wasn't like, I didn't have any inkling of it, but the greatest illustration of it one time was I was at the hospital with my mom because she was a registered nurse. And we're sitting in the lobby, and I can't even remember why we were together in the lobby. But while we were sitting in the lobby, there was a lady who was getting sick, and all of a sudden she began to throw up.
Oh, no.
And so my mom grabs me and puts me into action. And it just so happened to be one of the little buckets
Yeah.
was close by or whatever. I don't know what the technical medical term
A
is.
Mises bucket.
You're an RN. That's right.
Yeah.
You
I'm
know
an
these
RN.
things.
Yes.
Okay. That thingy
Yes.
was hanging around, and she grabs me and puts the thing in my hands and has me hold it up.
Wow.
Like, so I'm serving some random person.
About how
Yeah.
old are you at this point?
I mean, I had to be like 12.
Okay. Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So it's disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just being honest. It was disgusting, but it was like I was serving, and she dove into action.
Yeah.
So my mom was like putting in work, and I never forgot it. First off, because it was disgusting, but secondly, I also learned something from my mom in that moment.
Yeah.
That it was like when a person's in crisis and they need help and support, you jump in, you serve.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how I lost sight of that though when it was, let's say for instance, my wife or my kids who we didn't see eye to eye about something. And instead of me seeing that as a sickness that needed healing and a person who needed serving, right, I see it as a debate that needs to be won.
Oh.
Or I see the other person as an enemy who needs to be conquered. And so I went into relationships like you could be in love with a person, you can love your kids, you know, you can love your siblings, your brother and sister or whatever. But when it comes to a problem that typically should be handled like how we're sitting right now, we're all sitting next to each other. And if we were to have an attack or a threat that came towards us, we would all be together on the same side against the threat. And what typically happens in relationships is instead of it being the problem is over there, but we're on the same side of the table, we're sitting next to one another,
Yeah.
approaching the problem externally. What usually happens is the problem infiltrates and we see one another through the lens of the problem. So instead of me sitting next to a person within a relationship, I'm sitting with the problem. And the issue becomes now I've defined the relationship in such a way that until I fix you, I'm going to either fight, flight, freeze
Yeah.
within the relationship because I see you as a threat. And so that's a rough spot to be in.
Yeah.
If you're married to a person, you think you're sleeping with the enemy, right?
Yeah.
Because now you see them as a persistent problem. And so when I start talking about developing relational empathy, it took a lot for me because I'm that guy that's that lawyer, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, it's about right, it's about wrong, it's about the facts, no gray, very black and white. And with Lynette, she specifically, she has belief in her top 5, which means that once she believes in a principle or she sees it a certain way, it can come off as stubborn, unwilling, unyieldedness, that type of thing. And so she and I, we would bump heads because I'm like, look, I learned this. This is a fact. I know what I'm doing. And in her mind, she's like, I'm standing for this principle and I'm right too. And
Yeah.
I'm like, but I'm more right than you. So, you know what I mean? So get with the program. So we would bump heads a lot. And after a while, I just felt like we couldn't gain traction. We weren't a good team.
Yeah.
And what was really missing, problems going to come and go. Conflict in relationships, doesn't matter what the relationship is, it's inevitable. Chaos is avoidable.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah,
and,
that's really
and,
good.
And in our relationships around us with our teens, when they were teens at that time, there was a lot of conflict with them, a lot of hormones and testosterones and stuff going on in the house, and it was constant war, and we all loved each other,
Yeah.
but it's very frustrating when you love someone,
Yeah.
but you feel like you can't connect with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all that being said, I'm in the process of learning to sit on the same side
Yeah.
as the people that I may not agree with, that I may not see eye to eye with.
Yeah.
And I'm learning to adjust to where the problem is not more important than the person.
It's good.
Do you find that friction occurs just specifically, I wouldn't say necessarily for the lack of empathy, but the lack of ability to employ empathy?
Yes, I think that's a very great way of putting it. And I'm not saying this from like a sarcastic standpoint, but I think most people aren't walking the line of being a sociopath, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a level of empathy. I think that sometimes we're so in our feelings, we're so in the fight to be right,
Yeah.
or in some cases there's such a heavy level of dominance from one person in a relationship to the other
Yeah.
that the other person is just kind of capitulating. They're just giving in
Yeah.
and withdrawing, and so we don't employ that
Yeah.
empathy. I definitely think that's the case.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking of married couples who are listening to this right now, so to speak, or, in your blended family that they're in this situation. They're like, man, I feel like I'm, battling and we're having an issue with connecting in this relationship. And so for those who maybe are in that season right now, Sean, like what, like just practical piece of advice and maybe even some spiritual, would you give them just that first step to kind of like find breakthrough in this area?
Yeah. So I read a book that gave me some insight on it. I would suggest the book, but there's some things in it that I don't like. But
Bits and pieces of it.
yeah. It was like, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, chew the meat, spit out the bones. It was a lot of bones.
Yeah.
But this little nugget right here stuck with me. And one of the things that he talked about was when you're triggered, you need to ask yourself, who's being triggered? Is it you right now or the you that never got closure in the past?
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times the current turmoil is the result of a lack of closure that happened in the past. And so now it doesn't take much because to light a fire within the relationship, because we're reading way more into the incident.
Yeah.
Because there's something in our brains that never had closure from some past incident. So we are very easily triggered. So one of the things that I think to employ that empathy that people need to do is like pause.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds so simple, but if you could just stop for a second and just recognize, oh, wait, I'm triggered right now. I'm feeling something and I need to get down through the rabbit hole of why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling. Don't deny the feeling. Don't try to suppress it. Don't stuff it, you know, but really get to the root of, okay, why am I feeling this way? Why am I triggered? And I think the other piece that would really help people is they need to study when they are triggered, what's happening physically in their body.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, throughout the years, I was waiting way too late in the process of fight, flight, freeze. I was so far into fight that anything that was going to be said at the moment of conflict with the loved one was going to be detrimental. It was going to be awful.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I went into conversations wanting to hurt people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That wasn't my intention. I love them so much that I'm passionate, you know, or we're so close that I just want us to be connected and on the same page. And it's just like, man, when that friction exists between you and a brother, a sister, or a parent, whatever, it hurts because they're so close.
Yeah.
And you want this level of understanding and it's just not present. So you're kind of fighting to gain a connected territory. You're fighting for like influence with their heart. And when you don't feel it, it triggers some things in you. So I think there's a great book that's called Managing Leadership Anxiety. And in that book, one of the things he discusses is the 3 areas that you would feel anxiety. One is anxiety within yourself. Another one is the anxiety that may exist between me and another person. So let's just say, for instance, if you walked in a room and you're carrying anger or sadness or fear, you know how sometimes you can walk in a room and you feel something's off. Right. So that anxiety could be transferred to me, or he talks about the anxiety that exists between groups. And this happens a lot in family. A kid is, carrying weight between the parents' relationship.
You know triangulation.
Exactly. You know, so now you have this dynamic of anxiety that just gets transferred over and over and over. Again. Parent comes in and says, clean the room. And the kid doesn't do it. Now the parent is losing their minds. And then the kid is kind of, so there's this dynamic. And he starts talking about, well, okay, where are you feeling that anxiety? And this is stuff I never had anybody, and I love my parents, love my family, went to school, all that. No one ever sat me down and said, Sean, where do you feel triggered physically? Where does the anxiety exist? And so one of the things that we find ourselves doing when we're doing a mediation with a couple where we're walking with them, it's a marriage intensive as we're taking them through this process. One of the things I try to do is help a couple to actually think for a change and say, well, wait, before you say something dumb or before you withdraw and retreat, where do you feel the anxiety? Is your mind racing? Is it a spinning mind? Is it a racing heart? Like literally you begin to feel your heart rate, or is it tightness in your body? And as I begin to process that within myself, I started realizing like, that tightness in the body thing is real. And it would get so bad with me that lip would start trembling. And then the only thing that was going to come out of that was going to be hostility. And so as I began to process, okay, Sean, you're starting to recognize that right now you're triggered. You need to take a time out and say, hey,
Yeah.
can we talk about this a little bit later on? I need to go like get my emotions right. And since I've done that and been learning to do that, it creates the space for me to be able to communicate with some empathy.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, lots of parallels here, and I know that whether we approach this from a marriage perspective or a blended family perspective, I love what you talked about when you talked about situational anxiety and the presence of anxiety, because I know blended families, we deal with that, and my first thought was like as children exchange homes. It's like when one child walks back in the other home, there's like you can feel the presence of some type of anxiety in that room because of maybe a trigger that you have from your ex-spouse and the healing that hasn't occurred. So again, as we express empathy in relationships, that includes our children. And how do we explore that and employ that to them particularly? So I love what you said about creating the space. That's about acknowledging, that this is the anxiety that's present. This is what's disabling my ability to show empathy. What else can we do from a parent to a child or from a marriage perspective to inject more empathy into our conversations?
So this is probably my favorite part, and I'm glad you asked that. So it's ouch and oops. And
ouch and oops.
Ouch and oops.
Ouch and oops. This is a game changer for everybody out there. It sounds cheesy, but it is a game changer.
We love cheesy.
Okay, so
Yeah.
here's how it goes. So you remember that whole thing about who's triggered? Is it you currently or you in the past? Well, if you think about it, like when your kids are little, if you had kids, you get this, or if you babysat somebody that was younger, I'm talking about toddler, whatever, and they fall down, they bump their knee. They get up, they're crying, and I mean, it's the end of the world. And you walk up to them and you pick them up and you hold them, you kiss the little spot, and you say, oh, where you hurt? And you're just kind of connecting with the kid. And I'm like, I'm so sorry that happened to you or whatever. You're going to be okay. And then eventually it's like, all right, try to walk again, whatever. And that need to have closure and to have someone grieve with you your pain, it never goes away.
Yeah.
It never goes away.
Yeah.
So the same way that the 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 5-year-old scrapes their knee and wants connection and comfort to be seen and known and heard and to have someone feel with them.
Yeah.
Even though you may be thinking in your mind as a parent, like, or babysitter or whatever, when they fall, it's like, that ain't even a big fall, right?
Yeah.
That's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
You still kind of play the role.
Yeah.
You play the role and it's like, oh, come on, let me hug you, let me kiss it. And then you kind of dismiss them and let them go. And what the kid received then is still what an adult needs right now, or what your teenager needs right now.
Yeah.
They need a moment where it's not about winning the argument or pointing out the facts or criticizing them or judging their opinions. When a person is feeling fear or anger or anxiety, usually it's because they haven't grieved a loss.
Yeah.
There's something in them that hasn't had time to grieve a pain point.
Yeah.
And what they need before y'all start moving into solutions, conflict resolution, they just need connection. Empathy is that moment where I sit down with you and I just try to see it from your side.
Yeah.
I may not agree with the fact that, you feel like I said something disrespectful. I might not agree with it, but what does it cost me to like sit down with you and say, oh, I'm so sorry you felt that way. That wasn't my intention.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me what it was like to be, in that situation?
Yeah, that's
when that
good.
happened or whatever. You know what I mean? So to be able to sit down, my main goal when I was parenting my teens was to get to the facts. And so I spent very little time. This was a big mistake that I made, but I spent very little time like just sitting down with them, just saying, tell me how you feel about it.
Yeah.
Well, what do you need? How can I help you? Right? Just being more empathetic and just learning to sit down and give them a moment to just be.
Yeah.
To be an emotional human with feelings and thoughts and emotions and just let them process it in your presence. It's just about connection.
Yeah.
So like from a spiritual perspective, when we say oops and ouch, the idea becomes every spouse or kid to parent or parent to kid, they're going to have this moment where they need to just be able to say, ouch.
Yeah.
And you don't come to them and say, well, that's a dumb ouch. It's no, just let them hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let
Yeah,
them
that's
get it
good.
out. Let them
Yeah.
say it.
Yeah.
And then you just come alongside them after you've heard it, and you let them get it out. You just kind of come right next to them, and you just say, "Oops, my fault."
Yeah.
And even if you didn't do it wrong, even if it wasn't your intention, it's just about connection. And most people are trying to do conflict resolution without connection. And if
Yeah.
you get that wrong, you'll find reconciliation is going to be so much harder, because in the future, they're still going to be triggered because they never received closure.
Yeah.
Give them closure through comfort before you start moving to conflict resolution.
That's good. Well, I think what I took from that too is like you're giving them an opportunity to process it out in the moment versus years later having to go back and then process that on top of all of the other things. And you're not dismissing what they're feeling in the moment. So you said that when we do that, we not only are we connecting with them, but but you're telling them, I see you, I hear you, and I'm sorry that you're feeling this way. And we have littles, and so I see so much how that when you put it in perspective, I was like, yeah, like how much that, and even with our spouse too. I mean, I know, just to be completely vulnerable, there have been times when you and I have gotten into it and I've dismissed it, and I'm just like, oh, come on, I'm a very black and white person too. I'm like the facts, and I'm like, all right, we don't have time to, let's go. And
You would think that I would be like that. I'm actually the more emotional one of
yes,
the group.
yes.
Like more like, okay, my feelings are really front and center here, so I need
Scott,
to.
it's safe to say Scott is definitely the more sensitive one.
Really?
And that, yes.
I am, yeah.
Well, and I think that comes from our backgrounds too, because I just was in survival mode for so long. So
got
there
you.
was no time to, like, I didn't have anyone. There was nothing
Talk about it.
to, I didn't have anybody processing that out with me. I was raised by a single mom. And so it was always a fight mode and, or flight mode. And it was like, okay, we got it. We don't have time to process this. We don't have time to cry. We don't have time to grieve. Like, you've just got to get up and you've got to survive and get on with life. And so coming into our marriage, I would dismiss Scott's feeling a lot, and I'd be like, you're so sensitive. Like, and it would really tear him down. And so even in our marriage, I've had to learn, like, when he says, hey, this made me feel a certain way, I have to pause and I have to take responsibility for that and say, I am so sorry. That was not my intention. And I can even tell now when we're in conversation before he even says anything, I can be like, I know that what I just said hurt you. I'm sorry. And I didn't mean it that way. This was what I was trying to say.
Yes. And to me, that's when you know that you've strengthened the muscle of empathy.
Yes.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask is, I know a lot of people here are like, okay, this empathy thing, that sounds like a good deal for my marriage. Or that sounds like a good thing for my blended family. I'm like, how do I get a shot of that, on a daily basis? Or how do I know when I don't have enough?
Yeah.
Because I think that as parents, you know,
a great question.
You can sit back and go, okay, I need to have empathy, but I really can't stop and connect every single time every one of my 7 kids has an ouch.
Right, I get
because
that.
I just don't have the capacity to do that.
Yeah.
So how do you, really realistically, and I know in marriage, I'm going to give one solution before I ask you the solution. I know in marriage, again, we talk about this a lot, is, hey, we make sure we have checkpoints.
Yep.
Yeah.
We make sure that we have, our business meeting, our marriage meeting once a week, and we make sure that we spend time together. So those are ways that as a marriage we can do that. But how do you know when you're on the right track? Let me say it this way. Where is it demonstrated that you have a healthy level of empathy?
When the other person feels safe sharing,
Ooh, yeah.
That's good.
and that's hard.
Yeah.
Because I'll speak for me and Lynette, for instance. I'll speak for me and one of my kids. So there was this weird situation that happened, and one of our kids, she just kind of struggled with some things that she was processing at that time. It was a situation she was processing, and she really had a kind of like a little bit of a breakdown. And we kind of talked to her, and her response was that, well, she felt like even though she knew she can talk to us about everything, she didn't know for sure that she was safe to express all her feelings.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, you can talk to us about whatever, and we don't judge. She was like, yeah, I know y'all don't condemn, you don't shame me or anything like that. She was like, but when it came to feelings, I didn't think that you wanted to hear them. It was kind of like the thing was, get up, get ready for school, let's go. If you're going to church, come on, hurry up, guys. We always on the move. So there was this, it was kind of implied in body language.
Mm-hmm.
It was implied in how fast conversations needed to be.
Yeah.
It was implied that it wasn't as important to sit there and just let's talk about feelings
Yeah.
and emotions.
Yeah.
So I felt like that was, and it took a lot for her to even say it. Which for me was just, it just was like a dagger because I
Yeah.
was like, no, that's
I
not
thought I was
my-"
doing such a good
I
job.
know, yeah.
Like I thought I was doing this right.
You
I got it
know,
wrong.
and it was just like,
Yeah.
oh man, I was crushed. And so what I had to do then, once I realized like that, you know, it's easy to point the finger and say, well, you should have known better. It was better for me to humble myself and say, well, dang it, I should have given a greater invitation
Yeah.
and slowed down.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'd encourage, especially if it's like parents to your children, you really do have to have at least every other night a 10-minute, I don't care, just in some way. It's not about the grades. It's not about sports. It's not about cleaning up. It's just, I see you.
Yeah.
You know, how are you? I'm so serious. It sounds so cheesy, but it's just like, where does it hurt?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
how you feeling right now?
Yeah.
They still need to be seen.
Oh, it's good. Okay.
Yeah, that question of where does it hurt?
Yeah.
That is such a powerful question. And the last thing I would say on this, and Sean, you just dropped so much wisdom here, but I also don't want to miss an opportunity to say, if you're struggling in this area, finding a great counselor will be a huge blessing for you.
Yes.
You know, the overall goal in counseling is not to just highlight where things are deficient. It is to promote where things can be more healthy.
Yeah.
And give you perspective so that you can have better relationships,
Right.
so that you can enjoy your relationships more. I mean, that's really what we do.
Absolutely.
So again, if you're struggling in this area, Sevn Therapy, we have some amazing counselors that would love to work with you. And definitely don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't wait on this.
Listen, that part right there, one of my biggest, I guess if you could say, regrets was that I waited so long to get therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we definitely, when you talk about survival mode, good Lord, it was just,
Yeah.
I mean, I was born in '79, so 80s babies are weird.
We are.
Because, I
We
mean,
are.
you know what I'm saying? Generationally, it was just different.
raised a little different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a high level of like independence,
Yes.
awkward freedom, but yet restraints and discipline. I mean, it was strange.
Yeah.
So there was still a heavy stigma on
Yeah.
therapy, you know,
Yeah.
and all that. And I think some of that's broken, you know, now, and it's much more widely acceptable to reach out for help. But I feel like I waited so long.
Yeah.
And I didn't, but one time I went on vacation. My wife and I, we were sitting in the bed. It was a heavy season where we were just running and doing and all the things. And then it just hit me like, we need a break.
Yeah.
It was a Thursday night. Kids had school. It was a Wednesday night. Thursday they had school. I looked at her. I said, do you want to go on vacation right now? Drive to San Antonio, take the kids, take them out of school for a couple of days, and just take a break. She was like, yes. She rolled over in the bed, packed everything. We got up that night, drove to San Antonio.
Oh,
went to the
wow.
Riverwalk.
Yeah.
We got to the hotel. The next day, we got to the hotel, 2 in the afternoon. Everybody, the whole family passed out, sleep on the bed. We woke up 2.5 hours later. And my point in that story was I didn't know how exhausted we were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something when you're in survival mode,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you never get the closure.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why your fuse is short. You wonder why a small gesture that somebody makes hits way deeper than it should.
Yep.
You wonder why you got this cognitive dissonance, and you can be driving miles and miles and miles and have no clue how you got where you were by the time you got there.
Yeah.
It's because your mind is somewhere else because it's still in processing. It doesn't have closure, so you're not the best version of yourself. So you need
Yeah.
somebody, and in some cases, your spouse isn't ready. Your kids aren't ready
Yeah.
to develop this whole empathetic, open sharing. So you need to find a safe place where you can. And sometimes the best way to do that, you got to go and get a good therapist or a counselor or somebody that you can walk with.
Oh,
Love
that's
that.
good.
Love
That's
that.
good.
Well,
Yeah.
Sean, thanks for being with us
Yes,
today.
thank you, Sean.
Every time
Yeah.
you're with us, it is a treat and a blessing.
Good, y'all.
Um,
That's some good stuff.
Guys, we hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have. Again, we are just so thrilled that you've been with us today. Again, take an opportunity, like, share, comment, leave us your feedback. If you are interested in getting an amazing therapist. You can visit Sevn Therapy at Sevn Therapy.com. We treat all patients in the state of Texas. We can't treat everybody around the nation, but Texas, we got you.
Let's go.
So, guys, take care. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Be blessed in all that you do.
Hey guys, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
And you can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we hang out with more amazing podcast guests. And remember, nothing will be impossible with God.